Hey, church, told you I'd come to you with an extra teaching focused on the end of First Peter 2 and the beginning of First Peter 3. Hey, the big reason why is we often start at the beginning of First Peter 3 and we read, "Wives, submit to your husbands." And then we create this kind of theology that there is kind of this dichotomy of men are up here, what they say goes, women, you're down here, and all the more in the Christian household. This really is not the case. It doesn't show up this way. It's a misreading of this passage entirely. We claim, and we see it in Scripture, that God designed the husband and wife to be partners and equals in this. Sometimes different roles that they play, but equals in value. So what is going on in this passage? Well, it actually shows up in chapter 2 of First Peter. We get this understanding of the foundation Peter is building because the first word he says in chapter 3 is likewise, and then he says for wives to submit in this way, and he goes on and actually talks about husbands as well and congregations in the church also. But likewise is the key word there. That's the transition, which means we need to look before the likewise to see why the likewise would even be there. And what we find is this passage about Jesus in verse 22. It says to Jesus, he committed no sin, nor did he ever speak in ways meant to deceive. When he was insulted, look at this, he did not reply with insults. When he suffered, he did not threaten revenge. Instead, he entrusted himself to the one who judges justly. The Father is who he's talking about. So in this, it's describing how Jesus responded to being treated not very well, right? When he was insulted, he didn't respond in the same way. In fact, he didn't seek revenge as well when he suffered. This is the context of the Christians that Peter is writing to. There is insult. There is persecution. There's heavy verbal persecution at this point. We're going to find out later down the road there becomes very physical persecution. But here, there's this verbal suffering as well. There's this alienation suffering also because they have become Christians and they're following Christ. And like we said last Sunday, they're living out Christianity, which looked very, very different than the Roman Empire and emperor worship as well. So when he says Jesus acted this way, he didn't insult when he was insulted. He didn't seek revenge when he suffered. Now, when we jump down to chapter 3, when we see this, likewise, wives, submit to your own husbands. Now, a large group that was coming to know Jesus were wives because they were very poorly treated in the Roman Empire. They had no value whatsoever. That's not the way God designed it. And so it was very attractive to come to know Jesus, to be a part of the community that the church had to offer. We talked about that last Sunday in church as well. And so you had a lot of wives that were coming to know Jesus, but the husbands hadn't come to know Jesus. In fact, even in today's age, the stats tell us about 64% of our churches are mostly made up by women, meaning women are still coming to know Jesus, and sometimes their men are like, not interested, right? And so we see this. That's going on there, heavy percentage. And so Peter is directing him to, hey, wives, you're probably going to be insulted. You're going to be verbally suffer from those, especially your husbands, when you come to know Jesus. They're not going to understand, and they're going to speak of it in ways that are not good. And they're saying here, don't respond in the same way. Don't respond with insult. Don't respond with revenge. Don't hold grudge to that. Now, this is not saying, listen, wives, if you've been treated terribly, you're getting beat around physically and, verbally abused, that, you just bite your lip and stick it out. That's something a bit different. But here he's saying because of your Christianity. And so that's why this shows up. Notice that it goes on and it speaks to husbands too about this. It speaks to the church and says, church, don't respond this way either. The example of Christ was not to do that. Therefore, likewise, wives, husbands, church, don't respond that way either. This isn't how you should act. So it is a breakdown and comparison with how Jesus did it and how we should do it versus how the natural way or the Roman Empire, how it worked out. So there's your 5-minute extra teaching on that. There's a lot more you can go in there. So I encourage you, get in there with some commentary work if you'd like to do that. Do a little bit of Google research if you need that, or ask me and I will direct you to a few places that will give you much more in-depth understanding of this section. But start in 1 Peter 2 to understand 1 Peter 3. Lord bless. Hope this was good for you. Have a great rest of your day.